All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Most people are sitting down now. Thank you all for being here. My name is Katie Christensen. I'm a postdoc here at INSTAAR and your seminar coordinator. Today I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Dr. Marilyn Walker. I'm going to do a little brief introduction and then let her take it away. So Dr. Marilyn Walker received her PhD in environmental biology from the University of Colorado in 1987, yes. Thesis title was Vegetation and Floristics of Pingos, Central Arctic Coastal Plain, Alaska. So her work her broad research in the Arctic and alpine vegetation ecology included work at 3 long-term ecological research sites, and she was instrumental in the formation of the International Tundra Experiment, which remains a strong international collaboration effort here at CU Boulder. Marilyn was also a chief operating of Homer Energy, a software company that allows for optimization of hybrid electrical systems, which was sold to Underwriters Laboratory in 2019. She's now retired and writing and performing original music, and I see a guitar up here, so I think we're in for a treat. So everyone please welcome Dr. Marilyn Walker.
Oh my gosh, what a thing. So Nikki asked me to speak. I might cry, I'm sorry.
Oh.
But I was surprised. I didn't know what I could talk about. I've not been in science, doing science like you all do it for 20 years. But she said there would be pizza. So she's like, we got pizza. So I was like, oh, okay, good. So I hope the pizza's good. I'm going to try to keep it short. It's not going to be as short as I thought it would be. Most of my slides were actually destroyed or badly damaged during the flood of 2013. So I've cobbled them together. Fortunately, there's this thing called the internet now. You can just like steal stuff. So I did that a lot. Whoops. Sorry, this is not my computer.
Let's do next there. Do the next there.
Okay, there we go. It's been decades since I was active in science, as I said. So I don't have any grand synthesis. I'm not sure if I will speak truly to, I had to send in the title before I wrote the talk. But I do think that collaboration and synthesis kind of hold together all these various things that I've done through my life and my career. And so the heart of my work in science, even now in my music, collaboration and community kind of drive what I do. Okay, so I've structured it around 3 kind of major things. One is my PhD work, which was about this Arctic landform called pingos. And I realized like most people probably don't know what those are. So I'm going to talk about what they are, how they form, a very quick overview of my other research sites where I worked. And then really, I just have one slide on the work that I did with my husband, Peter Lilienthal. He's up here, about the company that we built and eventually sold to Underwriters Laboratory. So I'm so honored. I have friends here from the renewable energy world. I have my friend Ted is here, who is at there's people here. I hope Katie's listening on Zoom. She told me she would be. Katie Suding was an undergrad here as a visiting scientist. And so it's very cool, all these connections. A quick look at the places I'll be talking about. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Did that. Oops. So first, the pointer, right? What does this do? We didn't go over this. Anyway, up here, Prudhoe Bay, the beginning of the oil pipeline in Alaska. That's where I'll start. And then to the south, in the foothills of the Brooks Range, the Toolik Lake Long-Term Ecological Research Site. And then down into the Boreal Forest, Bonanza Creek LTER at the University of Alaska. And the Taimyr Peninsula, I'll touch on that, in Siberia. And Niwot Ridge up the road here. Okay, so, oh shoot. Is Chad here? Somebody help. I need to figure out how to like scroll down on the notes section
Oh, yeah.
without turning the slides.
Got it. So you just need to have the mouse over here.
Got it.
So then if you go next and
Thank you.
just move.
Got it.
There.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read, this is from a writing by John Coranda, who did some work, and he published this in 1970 in a magazine called Pacific Discovery. He said, we paddled and floated most of the day, which at this latitude was 24 hours long, but the wind from the north had made our progress very slow. Our arms and backs ached from paddling and poling the heavily laden canvas fall boats. During the afternoon, as I surveyed the landscape to the north from the riverbank, I noticed a dome-like structure on the horizon, but couldn't really believe there was anything that high out there. It was nearly 2 a.m., and the tundra was still brilliantly lit by the Arctic sun when we rounded a bank of the Toolik River and picked out our camp on the terrace bank a little bit above the river. Now, more than 600 yards away was a large conical mound that looked to me like one of the pyramids of Egypt. Okay, big imagination there, John. But anyway, it rose at least 100 feet above the tundra and had a base of 1,000 feet, which made it almost like a mountain on the flat prairie-like landscape. It was a pingo. Pingos are ice-cored hills, typically conical in shape. They can form and grow only in permafrost regions. They can reach over 50 meters in height very rarely, and up to 1 kilometer in diameter. This is a sort of smallish pingo, about 7 meters high. So I'll talk about how these things form and why they were of interest to me. Let's see. There we go. So this is the North Slope of Alaska. This is actually, the map outline is the borough area, about the size of Great Britain. No road network, only a few permanent settlements. The village of Utqiagvik, which I knew as Barrow, is here at Point Barrow up in here. Well, that doesn't show when I point it. Anyway, up the top there, Barrow, if you can see that. And then Dead Horse is an informal name. It's over to the right. You see Nuiqsut, and then Dead Horse at the mouth of the, that's the Sagavanirktok River in the purple there. That's sort of an informal name for the oil field infrastructure area. It's not a real town, and the pipeline, and that's where I worked out of. So to understand, first understanding the broader environmental region, there's Prudhoe Bay in the yellow. The area between these big floodplains, so the linear things, the right one is the Sagavanirktok River, huge braided river, the Kuparuk River, the Prudhoe Bay oil field focused around there. And these areas between those are these thaw lake plains. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. This area is underlain by permanently frozen ground and frozen to between 200 and 600 meters depth, with a relatively shallow superficial active layer, about a meter or so thick, that melts every summer. That's where all the life happens. As I was writing this, I thought I can't help but think about change, because that's what drove a lot of my work, was setting up being able to study change. And so some of the things I say would be different now, I'm sure, if I was there. And thanks people like Sarah carrying the flag on and doing good work. And but that is a pretty narrow little, that's a pretty delicate little thing there, and absolutely big right for change there. So the flat regions of these thaw lake plains are covered by this network of ice wedge polygons. These are on the right side there, those are what we call low-centered polygons, which have these shallow ponds in the middle. And then to the left, high-centered polygons, a whole other story about what's happening to this landscape now. I've just heard this from colleagues, not me. But I'm going to focus on the low-centered polygons because they're what's critical to the pingos. So how these form, this is a low-centered polygon in cross section. The ground temperatures are so cold, the ground cracks. And during the spring thaw, a little water can then flow into there. Over time, that builds up these wedges of ice shown in the blue. That then pushes up a little ridge. It has a trough in the middle where the ice wedge keeps growing, and then you get a feedback loop. So resulting in a ground pattern with a rim, a small trough where the wedge is, and then a pond in the middle. So as these ice wedge polygons grow and their ponds get deeper, the thermal mass of that water can lead to melting somewhere on the rims, which will then coalesce into a larger pond. So you think about like two polygons, one captures the next one, captures the next one. And here you can see the thaw, that's called a thaw lake now, instead of individual polygons. And I couldn't find a picture of this, but they're oriented, really clearly oriented along the direction of the wind. So they're elongated. Just interesting. All right. So now we're going to get into pingos. This is a cross section of one of these thaw lakes that's deep enough for pingo formation. Once the lake depth is greater than the average winter ice thickness, which at this time was about 2 meters, the permafrost below the lake melts. So you have ice, then you have free water, and that's going to continue to thaw. So you've got this thermal mass that's there all year round now. That's going to continue to thaw. That's called italic, a water saturated area. So here, permafrost, here, italic in the middle, water and an ice layer. So this very flat landscape and this cycle of thaw pond formation or thaw lake formation, if any side of this lake melts, remember there's very little topography here, then an adjacent basin can capture it. You end up with a drained thaw lake, a basin, and now this italic is no longer protected. And so permafrost begins to reform. And liquid water will move toward a freezing front. So it will start at the top where you've got the, winters, you got the long winters there, forming an ice lens shown there in the sort of dots. Sorry, we had really different graphics back then. Back in my day. So particularly within porous soil, there's going to be a lot of water. It's going to be almost pure water, which is driven by sort of suction forces as this ice forms. So got this ice lens growing. And eventually you can end up with a stable mound with an ice core, which is protected by the permafrost. In this region near Prudhoe Bay where I worked, conditions are almost perfect for pingo formation. So you have very deep permafrost, ice wedge polygons, gravel-rich substrate. So very little interstitial room there. Gravels, so you're going to reform dry permafrost. Ice is going to concentrate more easily. The most extensive study on the geomorphology of pingos was by Ross Mackay of the University of British Columbia, and he worked in the Tuktoyaktuk River, which is the delta east of Mackenzie River in Canada, and in the Northwest Territories. What's interesting to me is that in that region, the pingos all have free water underneath. He actually measured like that their heights would change, and the pingos in the Prudhoe Bay region are very stable. So I wish I had a better picture of this. I cleaned this up a little bit with Photoshop. We did not have Photoshop back then. This is thought to be the tallest pingo in the world at 53 meters. It was the last pingo that I got to visit. It's far from any roads, but one day I had a chance to hitch a heli ride and spent a day there and like frantically took as many samples as I could. It has its own Wikipedia page. I think I found initials made from stone on it that were left by some early Arctic explorer, maybe Leffingwell. I'm not sure. I couldn't find that slide. I'm sorry. So now that we know how they form, why else are they interesting? What led me to write this thing? Here it is. I brought it. The big one got sort of flood damaged, but fortunately it was reprinted in Germany. So, well, they're beautiful for one thing. That really touched me. They're like little flower gardens. They're hot spots for biodiversity, or at least I thought they must be. That was like one of my hypotheses. They not only have unique flora and vegetation communities, they're very important for wildlife. Basically, every terrestrial mammal uses them, some very extensively. I found evidence of 12 bird species. This was just from like casual observation. I wasn't really trying to study it. Obviously, the wetlands, which are the extensive here, are more important to most of the bird life there. But for the predators, the owls, the eagles, falcons, hawks, pingos are really important hunting sites as well as perching sites for them. For humans, they may have been the only dry camp, or may still be the only dry camping area available that's not along a river. So if you're setting out and you need to get somewhere, I know at least one archaeological survey found evidence of a 6,000-year campsite on a pingo. So people are going to be drawn to high places on a flat land. Okay, so my work was not experimental, it was descriptive. I was really drawn to these beautiful landforms, and they'd never been studied. I don't think they've been studied much since then. And my big question was about the vegetation on them, whether it was unique, what causes that, where does that vegetation come from? Whether there are rare species or communities on them, what are the elements of those? Are they biogeographic islands? Kind of. I'll just give away the ending here. Is there a successional vegetation sequence related to each? I reread that. I'm not sure about what I wrote there. I'll say, of course I said that there was, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to dive deeply into my results, but they're absolutely biodiversity hotspots in the area where Dr. Mackay studied. The large pingos are national landmarks. I'm pretty sure my friend Kay Everett wrote something saying that Cadler-O'Shillock Mound should be a national landmark. I don't think it is, but it's absolutely a rare and precious place and should be protected. Okay, I just quickly show you so I collected some massive amount of data. I'll just say that. And I looked at 41 different pingos. I did 7 sites on each one where I did sort of complete things. That included, so that was a total of 293 plots. I did a complete species list and abundance measures for the species, including vascular and non-vascular. That's for you non-biologists. That's the like the mosses and the lichens. I dug soil pits at each one of these things down to as far as we could go. So that was between 3/4 of a meter and meter and a half, depending on the side, down to the permafrost. And I still remember that first time, like where you try to dig and you're like, oh yeah, plunk. It's like concrete. So I described each horizon of the soil. I sampled each horizon. That was over 1,000 samples total. I measured the active layer depth. Very simple environmental data, sort of just scalar things. We also did temperatures. We put out, and we had to, I'm going to like make you think about the olden times, but we had a little shelter and a battery thing that went around, or maybe we wound it up. I don't know, but it like wrote on it. It had a pen in it, and then you had to digitize that. So anyway, I got temperature data from 3 different microsites, kind of like throughout the year. And when I thought about this talk, I thought I wanted to say all the like funny things that were said to me. I'm not going to say them all. But one of them was, I still remember turning in that data for publication and saying, isn't it interesting that at midnight, that it's warmer on the north facing side, which is not that big of a deal, but nobody had actually ever done it before. So I pointed out, and some guy goes, well, clearly she doesn't know what she's doing, because how could it be warmer on the north side? Well, hello. Have you been to the Arctic? Sun is over there. All right. Anyway. So this is, okay, that was my shelter hide thing. We also went out one year and I took a friend and we did snow surveys on them. So we looked at the snowpack pattern, which is really critical to the vegetation. This is just a little bit busy, but the the contours are like the 15 and 18, and then those are my sites. So I always did the windward facing site, the summit, 3 sites on the leeward, on the other side, so that I could capture the different snowbed communities, a south slope and a north slope. And okay, right, here we go. I grouped them into 4 regions. They had somewhat different superficial geology and also different access. Most of my sites there, I started out in Prudhoe Bay, and I was accessing this using the oil field roads, and which I could do back then. I don't know if you could do that now. They were very nice to me. And over into the Kaparik, the Tulip River area, a couple of those sites that look like they're like 15 and 37, you can see that. Those were like very long walks. I still remember that because I collected all these soil samples that we had to carry back. The rest of them, that little grouping down there, that was by a plane where we landed on the gravel bar of a river, and I got dropped off with another woman for like 10 days with a shotgun we didn't know how to use and no way to contact help, but we knew which direction the road was in. It's also where the most embarrassing moment in my life ever happened, and I'm going to spare you that. It had to do with taking a bath in the river just when the pilot decided to come see if we were okay. All right. So like I said, it was descriptive. I did deep dives on the floristics, the history of the vegetation, where it all came from. I found this archive of it, which is just awesome, at Oak Ridge. So it's all there. I don't know that my soil data are all there, but all the vegetation data, all the environmental data, at least the soil descriptions are all there. So if anybody ever wants that, there you go. So I want to just briefly touch on what it was like to be a woman working in an oil field in the 1980s. It is not exactly a charming place. I think this is off the internet, but apparently it's still not a charming place. I had to access most of my sites through oilfield service roads, and I never did feel unsafe. I was definitely hassled though. Couldn't find a slide of the North Slope Borough Camp where I used to stay. It would have looked something like this. All the buildings are up on pylons. Those are up on these gravel pads. Everything is on gravel pads. The roads are all gravel. It's the only way to build roads there because otherwise it would melt the permafrost. And the only way to get, before that, they could build ice roads before they had these paths. So anyway, the North Slope Borough Camp was nicer than this. It was really like one of the cleanest camps around. And I was grateful to not have to stay in the oil field camps in the, like the BP camp in Arco. Just bad vibe for me. This is the old post office attached to a general store. They had winter gear. They had everything a roughneck would want. And some of that I can't even tell you what it was, but tools, snacks, books. So this entryway here, the blue door, it goes into what's called an Arctic entry. So you enter and there's another door. So that keeps out in the winter, that's really important. In the summer, they would often have this door open. And one day I had to go to the store for some reason. So I went over and I noticed that the door was closed and I just thought it was odd, but I just trundled on up and went on in and it said like, please close the door. It's okay. And then this PA system, who knew that like the Prudhoe Bay General Store had a PA system? I think they could have just yelled at us. But anyway, they're like, attention shoppers or customers or whatever. The bear is now under the stairs. Please use extreme caution exiting the building. I'm like, thank you for that. Would have been useful to know that coming in. All right. So my Pingo work was this deep dive into the floras and the species of the Pingos, these vegetation communities. What was their broader distribution? That was part of what I need to look at. So in order to do that, I had to understand the Arctic more broadly. Where did this flora come from? So I gathered papers from others who'd worked in Canada, Russia, the European Arctic, and one of the things I discovered, and it just really struck me, was that our science and our ways of describing things were so deeply influenced by our characteristics of exactly where we were. And so everybody talked about the Arctic, but they were really talking about this spot on the Earth. And also their own, like our cultures of science were kind of different in how we would talk about things. So this was actually during the time of Glasnost, and that means openness in Russia. And it was the first time we had open communication with them. And so sort of amazes me that I did this, that I got funding from the Department of State to hold a meeting here in Boulder in conjunction with the Arctic Workshop, and got all these people together from all around the world who'd never met each other, who were all these sort of nerdy Arctic vegetation scientists. And yeah, it was like meeting my heroes in some cases. So we published this special edition of the Journal of Vegetation Science. And in the intro that I wrote with I'm going to call them my heroes, Fred Daniels of Germany and Eddie van der Marl of Sweden, we wrote about the critical importance of working together and of sharing our data. That was like a new concept. And that meeting launched many cooperative relationships. A lot of it continued. I wasn't involved in everything. I was just happy that I sort of made it happen. I was focusing elsewhere, but just last year, a group of scientists led by my colleague Skip Walker published this comprehensive map of Arctic vegetation, and it really began at that workshop here at INSTAAR. It took over 30 years of cooperating and studying to get enough data to really feel like they could do it. So one outcome of that international work was being invited on an expedition to the excuse me, Taimyr Peninsula in Siberia by the Soviet Academy of Science, still the Soviet. We visited 3 locations about 10 days each in these humongous Soviet helicopters that looked like they could carry small houses and might fall apart at any time. And there was 13 of us. I was the only American. This is Dr. Fio Ugolini of Florence, Italy, but he was at the University of Washington, but I'm a Florentine. He just never owned that. He moved back. Anyway, we worked closely together describing the soils of the plots where our Russian colleagues had already studied the vegetation. There was also one Norwegian entomologist, a Lithuanian who was somebody's uncle that came along to shoot caribou and geese for us. The guys would put out nets into the rivers and catch food. It was kind of different than an American expedition. So this is actually a view. This is from the last spot. I think this was my last night in the Taimyr Peninsula, looking toward Alaska at midnight from a bluff up on the Arctic Ocean. And those are ice floes, ice chunks you can see there. And I won't forget that night because it filled me with hope for the world, because I'd lived through the Cold War. And I thought, if I can sit in Russia and see the same sun, I couldn't see Alaska from there. That was a lie that Sarah Palin told. But the same sun was shining on Alaska. It made me feel connected. It made me feel like our world's maybe not as big as we thought. So right around the same time, I don't have these things necessarily in order, Pat Weber, the previous director of INSTAAR, and my dear friend and PhD advisor, convened an international meeting in Michigan with a very open agenda of finding ways to work together. These were people, some of the same people from my Boulder meeting, but many others too. Soil scientists. Jerry Brown's there, for those of you who know what that means. He's back in the back, way back there. And we had soil scientists, ecosystem scientists, population biologists. And we conceptualized the idea of a simple experiment that could be repeated at sites around the world. The International Tundra Experiment uses these simple open-top chambers, you can see them in the upper right there, to raise the temperature just a few degrees. They require no power. And then we developed a set of sampling protocols that we hoped were easily repeatable and understood. So after, I think, 3 tries, I got funding, a big grant to set up ITEX sites here in Colorado on Niwot Ridge, at Toolik Lake on the North Slope. And Katie Suding and I hauled these chambers up on Niwot Ridge through force of will. We hooked up harnesses around our waists, and there was still snow on the ground. And she was an undergrad at Williams College who came to see you as a visiting student.
And Marilyn?
Yeah.
What's the scale of those?
Oh, about a meter at the base. Yeah, they're small, tiny little plants. So just about when I got my first ITEX grant, this happened. Best thing ever, but it made a hard job harder. And his dad's attitude, we're still friends, was that this was 100% my responsibility. So put him to work. Yeah. Well-meaning male colleagues told me stories of being on glaciers where people brought their families. And I'm like, yeah, and the wife came along. I don't have a wife. So that's okay. All right. This was the first synthetic analysis of the ITEX data. I got about 30 people together at the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis in Santa Barbara, where we learned just how difficult it was to synthesize data using common sampling protocols collected by different people, all with their own quirks and reasons for doing things their own way. But I actually had everyone there in the room talking about how we were going to do this, not just asking us, for their data. That wouldn't have worked back then. So meta-analysis is an analysis of the analyses. It was developed for medical research as a way to look at broader trends beyond single studies. But in our case, it really helped us. We were still able to control a lot of the issues that make meta-analysis challenging, and came up with this paper. And that was my postdoc, Anna Arft, who took the lead on that. So I'm really proud ITEX has it continues to be important cooperative means for Arctic biology. These are all the places that they've met since then with this photo from 2025. I wasn't there, near Göteborg, Sweden. In addition to the ITEX experiments about that same time, I had grids of plots. I set up these grids up on Niwot Ridge. Also at the Toolik Lake LTER site, that's the left square, ignore the lower. And then this is an upside down map, apparently, I think. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's upside down. Anyway, that's in Naviat Creek, about 10 miles away. And so I had these 100-meter grids there and 50-meter grid and also and repeatable, using kind of the same protocols as ITEX, repeatable ways to measure, and also complete soil descriptions, thaw layer depths, etc. Just showing Toolik Lake. It's so beautiful. This is the northern foothills of the Brooks Range. The original site at Toolik Lake this is like Toolik Lake 2.0, I would say, maybe, or like 1.3. It's a bunch of tents. And then eventually they got permanent tents. And then they hauled in some ATCO trailers. It was just sort of a mess. It was a big mess. It was on an old abandoned pad that had been used during all these sites, like Naviat Creek, same thing, only because of the pipeline did they have a road in there. And so this was an abandoned pad that had been used to build the haul road. And I remember we got a CB radio, and we could talk to the truckers driving down the haul road. We felt like we weren't alone in the world anymore. So this is around 1994. And here is Toolik Lake from the air today. It's also a neon site, so it's really become something. And from when John Hobby kind of found this place to measure some fish. And the neon site actually is a aquatic site, not a terrestrial one, is my understanding. This is Naviat Creek, just really beautiful. Originally funded by the Department of Energy, and a long-standing hydrologic data set there, and also our vegetation data sets. So in 1999, I was hired by the Forest Service to co-lead the Boreal Forest LTER site that was co-funded by LTR and by NSF and the Forest Service. This ecosystem is still permafrost, but it's really defined by flooding and fire. Discontinuous permafrost, very unstable. There are 2 conifer species in that area, black and white spruce. With these spindly black spruce, the most common, they can survive on this boggy ground caused by the permafrost, whereas white spruce are limited to well-drained sites along rivers and on slopes. And my main contributions at Bonanza Creek were really to lead the science, make sure the pieces fit together. My student, Teresa Nettleton Hollingsworth, was a Boulder High and CU grad who started in science here at INSTAAR, helping me sort stuff from Niwot Ridge. And then she followed me up there, and she passed away last year. at 49. But she became really the scientific and intellectual leader in thinking about these complex systems and also the influence of fire on the tundra, which is now happening. Here she is in her element. That's her on the left. She's kind of in the shadow there, but anyway, so that's why I put another picture over there. Okay, well, I left academia for deeply personal reasons. My husband of now almost 20 years, Peter Lilienthal, is here in the front row. Raise your hand, Peter. He and I built and grew a company that provided optimization models for hybrid electric power systems. In other words, what's the cheapest thing that won't break, which is very important in making power affordable. And so this was something that he developed at the lab that used to be called the National Renewable Energy Laboratory down the road. I hope it is again someday. And I brought to that effort that the same interest in collaboration. We started an international meeting, and I would say to people, I'd say to like the battery companies that showed up, right now, you need to be friends. You're going to be competitors when this takes off, but you need to be friends. You need to build this industry. And I'll tell you, if the power goes down tomorrow, you're going to wish you had Homer to help you. Anyway, so this really helps people build these autonomous power systems that can stand on their own. That's all I need to say about that. I could give like 6 talks on that. All right. I decided to focus on Pingos to honor INSTAAR. I benefited so much from being part of an interdisciplinary institute where my interest in how physical science interacted with biology gave me a really unique perspective. I'm so glad that that happened because I was ready to go off and study population biology in Wyoming because I loved treeless landscapes. Probably why I didn't last long in Bonanza Creek, I don't know. But anyway, this is what I'm doing right now, flying along, writing songs. This is the place in the talk where I should thank all my collaborators, and there's no way to do that without forgetting a whole bunch of them. A lot of the people, some of you are here in the room. So many people touch our lives as we move through them, but certainly Pat Weber was my biggest influence, and John Andrews was on my PhD committee. Giff was my neighbor and a young professor at the time. Tim Seastead is here. I remember when Tim came on the faculty. So many other colleagues, students, postdocs who have gone on to do their own thing. I'll just end by saying we're sort of in this thing together, for better or worse. And thank you. Thanks, Nancy.
If you want your questions and answers, maybe with the L, because we're gonna switch the mics over in a second, but if you just want to repeat the question to the L, that way people can hear it on Zoom.
Yeah. Anybody have questions?
So I'm not gonna run around like.
Okay. I'll repeat it. No questions?
I have a question.
And
Okay. So Pingos, what's happening with Pingos now?
That's, yeah, I love that question. So okay, sorry. The question was, thank you. The question was, what's happening with Pingos now with permafrost degradation? I was hoping somebody would ask that question. I don't know exactly, but I know it more anecdotally. One of my students and Skip have been talking for years about trying to go back to some of the Pingos. They have visited a few. So the real key with the Pingos is going to be the active layer depth and how, if you get down to impact that ice core or not. So it's not necessarily that the permafrost is going to degrade so much, but the active layer, if the active layer depth gets down. I mean, I did observe even back then, some Pingos where ice cores were exposed. That was usually due to something like a bear that had dug something out to get to a ground squirrel, and then that moved the soil layer above the active layer down, so then it changed things. And once that happens, then of course there's a feedback loop. So I don't know, I think that is an interesting question. And I mean, some of these Pingos, like Cadbroschillic Mound just kind of blows me away. Like nobody's cored it. The Pingos that we cored were little ones. And so yeah, and actually, that was why when I said the whole succession thing, like nobody really know. There was these different shapes of pingos, and was that old or new? They looked like older ones to me, but I don't really know. So nobody knows. I think that, what's going to happen on the North Slope generally with things is fire has been this big surprise that, gigantic tundra fires, just like we have like who knew that the fire regime was going to change like that? Yeah.
I have a question from our Zoom, so you don't have to repeat it because it's in the chat. Any comments about the impact of oil and gas development in our environment?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a whole other talk. I mean, there's so many ways to look at that question. One of them is on the hydrology that actually just building these roads and paths has changed the hydrology, the surface hydrology of this very flat landscape. Do caribou, it doesn't appear, I mean, caribou are pretty resilient species in a way. If I just look at caribou as like, what are the species that are up there, the terrestrial species? Caribou, grizzly bear, are they that impacted? Should we stay out of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge? Hell yes. I'll just say that because it's an Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And like, we don't need the oil anyway, and we should just put up a lot more solar and wind. But I was in renewable energy for a lot of years and still have friends in there. So yes, actually, one of the studies that I was part of, we worked with one of the villages, Anuktuvik, I think. We worked at two different villages, one in Canada, one in Alaska, on the impacts on the humans in those villages from the changing. I mean, I think for them, I think when you look at their changing things, and I think the impacts on the
Yeah, he didn't want to sit on the other side.
I don't know why. Anyway, I think the impacts on the ocean mammals are going to really be much bigger deals than the terrestrial. That's my gut, but yeah.
Were there endemic species on the payground?
There were a few. Yeah, there were a few. And they weren't really endemic. They were from elsewhere and regionally only on the Pingos. They weren't truly endemic species. I don't think they're really large enough to have endemic species. Yeah.
When we talked on the phone, a long time ago now about this presentation, you shared that you had a fun story about the time that you and Gift Miller and Jim White sent the first email. I was wondering if you could tell that story now.
Well, I will, such as I can remember it. So the question is, how do you send an email? And Jim White was kind of new here, and like we had this new technology called email. And I'm pretty technical. Actually, like before I came to INSTAAR, I was a coder. I was doing coding, and I'm really into analysis and computers. That's why it was great to run a software company. Anyway, I just remember them coming in and us all trying to figure out how to do it. And somebody says, how many PhDs does it take to send an email? And apparently 3 was just maybe the minimum. That's maybe Gift probably doesn't remember that, but
It's on the North Slope.
that was here.
Okay.
Yeah, that was here in the old asbestos building. Yeah. Yeah, we used to have dial up, and you put the thing down. Yeah.
What were the results of your iText meta-analysis? I feel like you buried the lead a little bit.
Wish
Seemed like an enormous effort.
it was. And I'm sorry that I didn't go read the paper again and that I don't remember what it was. What I think some of the interesting results that I recall we seeing was that we were seeing in some areas, I think Sarah might know better than I do if you recall, Sarah. I don't know if you you don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot.
She's earlier, things grow more.
Yeah, things got bigger. some things got smaller, there was more shrubs for sure. I mean, there was more shrub growth. Some of it was predictable and some of it wasn't. I think one of the things that surprised us was seeing the changes in the control plots, because we were already seeing changing temperatures, and that came out in the data. I remember that. And the rest of it was a bit not surprising, but at least we had it documented. Yeah.
Hazel asks, after such a marvelous research career, what are some of the themes in your musical compositions?
Okay, thank you. My themes are, okay. I have one album out. It was for families of complete families. Sarah has it. And because she has a kid. And
8-year-olds like it.
yeah, 8-year-olds love it. My friend Ann O'Daz, who was in one of those pictures, she says her grandkid wants to listen to it over and over again. So playfulness, but also like a lot of my love for the environmental world. I almost wore my mushroom shirt because I have one of the songs on here is called Fungus Among Us, which was because one of the scientists on the Timor Peninsula named I always thought that if I was going to really be recognized as a biologist, I should have a species named after me. And then one day I get this email and I'm like, it happened. And it's a fungus. So you have to be careful what you wish for. Yeah, I'm currently working on another studio album that's on climate change and on not only on climate change, it's got a song called So Long Arapaho, about Arapaho Glacier. Got a song called There's a Firestorm Over the Rockies. And I didn't want to, well, for one thing, I didn't practice those songs, so I can't play them today, but they're really effing sad, and so I also try to put hope in there and also writing a lot of like angry political bangers right now, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Whatever I feel like doing. Yeah, but absolutely my love for oh, I guess it's not you that asked the question, but whoever asked that question, thank you. It's my love for the world and for the humans in it that's about my songs. I do not write these love songs like a lot of country singers do. Yeah.
You'll be happy to know that we actually have a e-bio departmental band now. You should sit in with us sometime.
I would be happy to do that.
But I was wondering about Pingo biogeography and what you found in terms of the plant composition and things like Pingo size and Pingo.
Yes, yes. And I'm sorry that I didn't go into that, but again, it was a lot of stuff to try to synthesize. I'm trying to read it now because I looked at the floras and I'm sorry, the question was Pingo biogeography for those who are on Zoom. I looked at the floras from so many different perspectives. Yeah, Pingo size, but also like the slopes. So like the south slopes on them had these Beringian species that weren't really anywhere else except, and even in like the Fairbanks area, those Beringian species, those would have been land bridge species, were kind of rare, but it was a deep dive into floristics, and it kind of what made me go, we need to think about this region differently. Yeah. Yeah.
Question, you collected 1,000 or more soil samples. What were you looking for? And I mean, are the soils a product of the vegetation or chicken and egg question there?
Sure. So the question is, I collected all these soil samples. Why? Well, I mean, soil is a pretty basic part of a vegetation study in a way. I mean, that's where it is. But where does soil come from? Soil comes from the geology, what's there, what's the parent material, what's the climate, what's the vegetation, what's the history. So some of that, actually, there's one diagram that I always find fascinating that is so hard to describe, and I didn't show it, but which was there was a negative correlation between, and it was of a log or something, of pH and deviation from the mean of pH at a single pingo. And that is because over time, the soils become acidified. That's a process that happens in soils unless you have incoming source of calcium. They become acidified, and but the acidification rates are going to be different on different microsites depending on the vegetation. Sorry, this doesn't really answer your question, but it is a complex question because soils are a complex piece to the whole thing. And to me, it was just a way that that's what you do when you study a vegetation. You have to know what the soil is, what's it on, what's the pH, what's the, what, and I would just, yeah, so.
You're measuring depth factors. pH.
I was measuring pH, I was measuring carbon content, I was measuring mineral, what were the various sandsilt clay percentages, what were the gravel percentages. And there was a whole huge analysis. I was supposed to say vegetation data are very, very complex data because they're multivariate. So I did a lot of multivariate analysis to simplify those data and then correlate it back to and analyze it back to the environmental data. Yes.
Wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I was curious, you mentioned you poured the windows. What was the debris content like? How clean was that ice?
Yeah. The question was, how clean was the ice and what was the debris content? And do I remember? It's in here, we can look it up later. But as I recall, it was in layers for sure. There were definitely layers within the ice cores that we found. That's all I can tell you. And some were super gravelly and some were really, really clean. Yep. Ted.
So it's interesting that your data on Earth data, NASA Earth data is sort of an interesting thing. But is anybody looking at pingos with remote sensing these days? I mean, it seems to me that would be sort of the only more interesting augmentation of sampling.
The question is anybody using remote sensing to do pingos these days? Not that I know of. Talk to me, maybe we should write a grant. Oh, I think that's hard to do these days. Yeah, I heard this thing about science, but anyway, not that I know of. I mean, they're small. They're really small little things. So
What's the dimension, the angle, the width?
Of like a sort of average one might be like 10 meters high. I mean, we have this 50-meter one that I show a picture of that's like a mountain, but mostly no, mostly they're small hills. Think Valmont Butte kind of things. Actually, that would be a large pingo. Yeah. So you'd have to do drone-based remote sensing or something, which you might as well just get down and count the darn species, it's more fun anyway.
Can we thank our speaker one more time?
Thank you. Would you all like to hear a song?
Yeah.
Switch them.
The new song, I hope I remember the words. It's really, really new. Never played it in front of anybody before. World premiere. Because I don't know about you, but I need a little hope right now. I want to find a place off the road where dream weavers sing to the stars. I want to dance along that river where coyotes play guitars. I want to visit that latitude where birds are singing gratitudes and the mercies of beatitudes are the only laws we need. Hope holds us together. Dreams carry us forever. Hope holds us together. Hope holds us. I want to sing a song to the wind like it was my best friend. I want to howl to every rock and tree like they were loving me. I want to see the dragons fly like angels on the wind, to know that we will find our way back home again. Hope holds us together. Dreams carry us forever. Hope holds us together. Hope holds us. It's a light inside. Doesn't mean we're blind. Hope is our guide across this divide. Hope holds us together. Dreams carry us forever. Hope holds us together. Hope holds us. Hope holds us. Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. I probably will go home and cry a little, but INSTAAR still here. So let's give a cheer for that. Yeah. All right.